Hey everyone, a quick scheduling update. The fifth quarter podcast is moving from a weekly show to an every other week schedule. Thank you so much for your support. I'm excited to keep sharing these amazing journeys with you.
I remember I was actually working at my dad's office that summer, just trying to get some extra experience, using that connection,
That's right.
people coffee, doing the thing. And the email comes in from NBC and it says, we're so sorry, but you have not been selected.
Today on the sideline, Jessica Benson, host of The Jessica Benson Show with CJ Hurt on Grind City Media. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I am your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the world of sports, talking with retired athletes, current athletes, and everyone that makes the sports world great. A quick reminder, if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, make a note, subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. You can find all the information on our website at 5thquarterpodcast.com. Now, grab your iced tea or your coffee, get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Today on the sideline, we're focusing on a conversation that's close to my heart, women in sports. Joining me is someone who's been blazing trails in this space for years. She's the host of the Jessica Benson Show with CJ Hurt on Grind City Media and host for the Memphis Grizzlies radio network. Her story is one of resilience, passion, and breaking barriers. Welcome to the show, Jessica Benson.
So happy to be here.
I am just thrilled to have you on here. When I started this sub series, you were like one of the inspirations for that because I just think you're so cool.
I think you're so cool.
And I want to talk like how we first met. When I moved back from Houston, I got back involved with the American Heart Association, and you were nominated as a Woman of Impact for the Heart Association. And I photographed you on a cold, miserable day outside of FedEx Forum at the very last moment. But I was, and it was funny because when Kate, our Heart Association person, when she told me your name, I was like, that sounds really familiar. I feel like I know her, but I had been following you when I lived in Houston.
Okay.
So I was just thrilled, and I followed you ever since then, and we've just kind of become social media buddies. And I love listening to you and follow all of your accounts. And so we're going to dive into that today.
Amazing. I love your show. I love what you've been doing. I've just been following along from social media, just
I
every time I
appreciate that.
can.
I was really I've been kind of vocal about the lack of women in sports, especially in Memphis. And um, there's not many people that talk about sports that are female, and they don't necessarily give that much credit to women in sports in general. So I'm very excited to have you on here. So let's talk about the show first. Like,
Yes.
what's it all about? Where can you find it? When does it air? Like all of it.
We are on weekday mornings. We're live at 8, but I always tell people if you're not a morning person, I'm not a morning person despite having a morning show. Because we do have our shows on YouTube, you can watch it at any time, or if you want to just listen to it, it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that good stuff. But I really like the YouTube version of it is what's closest to my heart because it feels like this hybrid between the podcast space and the video space and coming from the world of TV news and doing that version of the sports reporting and sports anchoring for a while. This kind of feels like the best of both worlds. So when it's in the visual medium and being able to show things with it, but we're a sports show at our core, but we're really an everything show. We talk about everything in pop culture, movies, TV, music, dumb stories you see on the internet, funny stories, interesting stories. And I can truly say that you never know what you're going to get when you turn into an episode. My co-host and producer, CJ Hurt, and I just talk about whatever we think of at any given time. And that can take us on a wild ride of topics from any given morning. But obviously, we're very Grizzlies focused. And during the Grizzlies season, it is nice to have a platform to talk in depth about the team, and being connected with the team in that way is great. And that's kind of like the core of our content.
Right.
But we're also both huge football fans. So we talk a lot of college football, a lot of NFL along the way, and everything else in between, which is great.
We were talking before we started recording, and you were talking about how it's really hard right now because there's not a lot of content. So how do you navigate that space when there's not a lot of content?
This is like when you really make your money. That's what we always say. Like the shows during the season, yes, you're exhausted and doing kind of the double duty of I host the pregame and the postgame and the halftime shows for the Memphis Grizzlies radio network. And so everything that accompanies game day and then getting up early the next day, like sure, that's exhausting. But the dead of summer is when anyone who works in the like talk show, sports media space, that's when you find out, can you really do this? Because you'll wake up in the morning and you're like, I don't know what we are going to talk about. Earlier this week, there was a video of Ja Morant and Zach Edey working out together that felt like a gift from the heavens that like dropped by. We treated it like it was an Oscar award worthy film. And shouts by Nye because he does such a great job with the creative side of Ja Morant's team. And so the video was edited beautifully, but we were just so grateful to have that. We're like breaking down the handshake between and Zach and thinking about the screens that he's going to set and all that stuff. So I'll usually I try to leave things behind at night, even though I'm consuming either sports or TV or just news in general. And I do the bulk of my prep in the morning. So I get up every morning at 4:30. And
Oh
yeah,
my
as a non-morning
God.
person, not my favorite part. It's all worth it, but 4:30 alarm. And from the time I really start kind of doing my hair and makeup coming out of the shower, I'm usually listening to a podcast or I've got ESPN up or
Right.
I'm trying to consume, what's happening, what's trending, what are people talking about right now to get an idea of what I want to do. And then I make my little morning oatmeal and my iced coffee and I sit down at my kitchen table and I really start kind of plotting out a rundown of what our show is going to look like that day.
So you can't really do that as much the night before or 2 days before.
There are certain times where you can't, like if you know something's coming down the pipe. For
Right.
example, we get into football season, like can I sit down and start creating little capsules of
Right.
what to look for in week 0 games for college football season? Or I'll start looking ahead at the NFL schedule for week 1 and try to think of these are things we might want to be talking about by the time we get here. But really, I think the best way to do it for me personally is just to get up, suck it up, get up early and take the freshest information that you have and go from there. And sometimes things will break in like the 7 a.m. window and we're live
Yeah.
at 8. And so it's trying to keep a pulse on that and get there and get situated. So it's just a lot. I probably prep too much. I'm an over preparer still at this point in
Right.
my career, but I really do view every single show as someone who's still, generally young in this
Mhm.
business. Every show is a chance for me to either prove to someone like, oh, I can learn something from her by watching her show, or I can laugh watching her show, or I'm just entertained in general. Or it's a chance for somebody to, on the opposite side of that, be like, she made a mistake. She doesn't know what she's talking about, or she didn't have anything to talk about today. Like, why does she have a show? So I
Right.
take that very seriously in my prep side of things, which as I continue forward, I probably need to chill a little bit. But for now, I just have pages of notes that I quickly put together.
I was listening this morning. I was watching you guys on YouTube, and how are you able to listen to the guest and talk in the chat? Because you guys, when you're live, you have a live chat going on,
Yeah.
and you're like you were like listening to her, but you're like typing to somebody else in the chat. Like, how do you do that? Is it just come natural now?
I think it's just for a kid who grew up in the early social media phone, like
Yeah.
cell usage. Like I'm 32. And so I had a cell phone when I was in high school and like learning how to multitask. Like we get criticized for multitasking, my generation. Like, oh, they're never paying attention. But somewhere along the way, we learned how to generally like have a conversation with someone while also perhaps tending to other things, which I don't think it's perfect. Like I really try, especially when we have a guest, to give like 92% of
Right.
my focus to the guest and give like 8% to the chat. But I'm so glad you brought up the chat because I love the chat. It's like our baby on the show and it's our truest, most loyal fans. And they're there every morning and they're always ready to have a conversation. And I think it's so fun to get immediate feedback on what you're talking about and inside jokes get formed. And it's just like, that's the community of it. That's where,
Right.
I would always love as many fans as possible. Like I want our numbers to be huge. I want our numbers to
Right.
be the moon. But it's those core fans who become like a member of the family almost
Mhm.
that means so much. So it can be tricky, and sometimes you get distracted and then you're like, oh shoot, I put too much into the chat in this moment and I missed what this guest said. But the guest did for this morning was Teresa Walker with the Associated Press, which, speaking of women in sports, my God, like could not have a
Right.
better role model in the industry than Teresa, who's based over in Nashville and comes over and does some stuff with Memphis sports whenever she gets assigned to it.
Right.
So it's just kind of knowing your guest and knowing the conversation.
Speaking of that family atmosphere, that was one thing. I've been on Twitter for years, and when I still lived in Houston, and that was kind of my connection to Memphis sports because I followed like all of the sports reporters, and so I didn't get to see a lot of games, so that was kind of my connection. And moving back, I mean, I love it when like sports is going on at night. Everybody that's on Twitter, and you get to know these people and you haven't even met them. And it just becomes this subculture, subfamily within the city itself. And I really love that.
Me too. And it's one of the reasons I can't quit Twitter. Like, I don't think Twitter is great for my mental health. I've tried to I try to always stay up on social media because frankly, it's a part of the job, right?
Right, right,
How you share your stories, it's how you share your show, it's how you connect with other people and continue to grow. And so I've really tried to dive into threads just because I don't want to miss the boat on
right.
something and be too late. And so now I'm trying to split my time between Twitter and threads, but the thing that Twitter will always have, or X, sorry, I'll call it
Yeah.
by its government name
I
now.
still call it
Twitter
Twitter too.
forever. But it's that in real time of
Yes.
watching a live event, and that's why it works so perfectly for sports. And it's this
Yes.
little community that you've built brick by brick where your page is the people that you want to be hearing from in this time. And it feels as if even if you're sitting alone on your couch
Yes.
in one night,
Yes.
you're not really alone. And I think that's
Yeah.
such a beautiful thing. We appropriately criticize social media quite a lot, but we don't do as good of a job of pointing out how it can help in a variety of situations and how it can really be a light for people. And like we don't have to make it bigger than it is,
Right.
but to have those people in your little Twitter family, and you're like, you know what, I'm watching the game, I want to hear from them, or I love it for award shows, and it's just like extra commentary. It's the peanut gallery,
It
is what.
is. And you're right. When I lived in Houston, I missed Memphis sports, and that gave me that connection, and I felt like I was a part of it. So you're absolutely right about that. I was doing all my research this morning on you because I waited till this morning to do it as well. And I was looking at your work history on LinkedIn. So you have had an amazing journey. Some of those items I didn't even know that you had done. And so let's start back at the beginning. What sparked your interest in sports and led you into sports media?
Yeah, so my dad worked in sports, which is always one of those things where it's in your genes. It's in your,
Right.
and my dad was a college commissioner. And so growing up in that family, on top of that, my mom's father was a football coach. He was a high school football
Oh,
coach, and then he was a college football coach at the University of Puget Sound. And then he did some like coordinator work at Hawaii. And ultimately, he was a scout for the Buffalo Bills. So I have the football side from
right.
my mom, and then I have the administrative athletic side from my dad, who got his
Right.
start in the NCAA and ultimately works his way up to, I grew up, he was the commissioner of the Western Athletic Conference at the time. And so this was just my world. Like our family vacations were all centered on sporting events because we were traveling with my dad for his work. And if we wanted to take a trip with my dad, he was going to be working and we could come along for the ride. So it always sounds, it's like, it always sounds like such a weird, humble brag, but like the Final Four was our family trip every
Oh
year.
my God.
The coolest thing in the world. And when I was a kid, I had the chance to be a ball girl for the Final Four. And I felt so privileged and lucky to be able to kind of take that like Nepo baby status of
Yes.
support. We would spend Christmases on whatever bowl game my dad needed to go to that year. And our summer vacations were attached to commissioner meetings or about my dad was on the basketball committee, which was the connection with the Final Four. But if we were going to the basketball committee meeting, so I was just around this industry from the time I was little and I didn't know anything else. And as I grew up, it just felt like the natural thing. Like I want to work around sports. Now, I also, fun fact that you won't find on the resume, I'm obsessed with musical theater. I
I
love.
kind of, okay, so you have that you went during high school, you went to Yale
Yes.
for a drama thing. So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what,
Yeah.
so that explains it. So,
Yes. So I did a Yale School of Drama summer intensive going into my senior year of high school. And it was probably one of the most important things that I did because it taught me that I did not want to be a working actor. I love theater and I had high hopes. I was going to go to a musical theater program and we were going to do this. And I was going to live in an apartment in New York with 12 other people and hit the pavement and make it work. And I was like, you know what? There's some really talented, like wildly talented people. And I'm not trying to beat myself down. I just had like the self-actualization that probably wasn't going to make it big at that point. And
right.
so I ended up shifting into the journalism space because it just felt creatively, it kind of like scratched a similar itch to
Hmm.
a certain degree. And also when I was at Yale that summer, it was my first time being around like exclusively non-sports people for weeks. It was a 5-week intensive program.
Right.
Nobody gave a darn about sports. And I hated that. Like I didn't have
Mhm.
anybody to talk to about something that I was so passionate about. And so I realized like I need sports in my life and started applying to journalism programs and broadcast journalism programs mostly. And I stumbled across USC, the University of Southern California, and they were adding a sports media minor which was going to kick in my first year. And I was like, well, that sounds
Right.
absolutely perfect. And so I'd kind of narrowed my schools down and we visited USC and I just fell in love with the campus. And my dad was like, great, so happy that you picked U$C, start applying for those scholarships, start figuring something out along the way. But I ended up there and that's kind of where the broadcast journalism and the sports piece of it took off. And even when I was in school, there were periods where I wanted to be a serious news girl because as a and I'll say girl, and you eventually become a woman, but
Yeah,
a
you'd say
woman,
girl.
um, it was always interesting at that time. Like my journalism teachers, sports was not seen as a serious medium. And as they were trying to grow as a journalism school, there was, a lot of intensity placed on what you wanted to be after undergrad. And if you said sports, they'd say, well, your only option in sports is really to be a sideline reporter, which is crazy to think back on. This was
It is.
2010 through 2014, and the lack of respect for what a career could be. But there was also great truth in it too, right? Like there
Mhm.
weren't a lot of examples of women who were not in the sideline role. And I never really wanted to be a sideline reporter. So that felt like an odd push and
Right.
pull get go for me. And so I thought maybe I'll be a newswoman and I'll be a reporter or an anchor or a producer or whatever it could be. And every time I drifted away, I just missed sports. And so
Right.
I kept coming back to sports and coming back to sports. And by the time I was looking for my first job, I was like, it has to be sports. So that's it.
Um, I just lost my train of thought as to what I was going to ask you. Um, so, and well, you just talked about how the industry is so tough and on women and not that many types of jobs for you back then. Um, what were in those early days, what were some of the moments where you felt like this was meant to be, or it was, is this even worth it?
Oh, it was a lot of, is this even worth it early on? It was a lot of wishing that I had what they would refer to as like practical aspirations. Like I wish that I wanted to be a doctor, or I wish that I wanted to be an engineer. God, I was roommates with someone who coded for Google fairly early. And I was just,
Wow.
you're so smart. I wish I
And
like that.
it's like a straight path. Like, there's
Exactly.
plenty of jobs. It's a straight path.
Yes. And I think that's one of the most daunting things about the industry is that it is a very path. Like
Yeah.
there are so many different routes that you can go to finding your own success, and what success is even
Yes.
so like fundamentally different for other people throughout the industry. And so early on I was committed to it, and I don't know if it was just like a dogged, like, I'm going to do this. And I am like indefatigable when it comes to having a goal and chasing it and not wanting to quit until it is reached. But coming out of school, you enter the like gauntlet of trying to find one of these very few sports reporter. And I decided to go the local TV news route because that is how, at the time, at least within my schooling, it was seen as go move to this small market, get a job there, make your mistakes, hope you don't
Right.
get fired, make $20,000 a year, but you're going to be able to develop your voice. And as hard as that part of the industry is, it was critical for me because that's exactly what I ended up doing. Once I finally got a job, it felt like I was
Right.
applying for jobs for 3 months. And in reality, it was just the summer, and I had a job by the end of the summer, which was wonderful. But in the meantime, you're just sending out emails and resumes
Yeah.
and cover letters, and you're getting a lot of no's. And I was often told that I looked really young and come back in a couple of years. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
if I could fast forward in time, you would still think I looked fairly young, well into my early 30s. So I don't think that problem was going to be solved quickly. But I don't ever make any secret of the biggest secret of this industry being right place, right
Right.
time, luck, working really hard to make sure that you're ready when the opportunity comes up, because the last thing you want is an opportunity and then you blow it, but
Mm-hmm.
also who you know and how you can be
Yes.
connected. So my now husband is also, or we previously were both in the local news space, and he was a year older than me. He went to Syracuse University, and he was working in Yakima, Washington, in a bureau at an NBC station in Yakima. So I'm a senior in college. He's in Yakima. We're making it work, and I'm looking for a job. And sure enough, an opening comes up at the main station of his company in the Tri-Cities, Washington, which is like 3 hours east of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And I apply. We would love to live in the same place again. And so
Right.
what did he do? He went into the news director's office and said, I know you have a lot of resumes and reels to go through, but I would love if you would look at my girlfriends. This is
Oh,
stuff. And I got hired. And like, who knows where my resume would have fallen in,
sure.
who knows if she would have ever even looked at it. Because, and that's not a knock to the news director life. Like, it's just impossible to look at everything that comes across your desk, especially in the sports space where just so many people are
Right.
applying all the time. And so we end up at the same station, which was perfect for both our relationship and for
Sure.
our early
Sure.
career.
I talk a lot about in my career coaching space. I talk a lot about how networking and connections is really important. But also, it no matter what job you apply to these days, most of the time they're going through a computer system to pull in those resumes.
Yeah.
And you need to know someone in order to get your resume pulled out, because otherwise the computer is there to kick you out.
Yeah.
So, shout out to Chris, your husband, for going in there and having the balls
I
to say,
know.
"Hey, look at my girlfriend's stuff."
I know. And wanting to work with me too. I was like, oh,
Yes.
we're in a good space. And that was long before we got married. That was very early in our relationship, but it was great. And yeah, you're so right. Like, it's one of those things. And even going back to my background with my dad working in college space, and I was so acutely aware and nervous. I never wanted to
Sure.
ever get anything that felt like it was a connection to my dad, especially once, like with internships and stuff.
Right.
I was like, sure, can you make a call? Can we figure? I was a Sports Nation intern for ESPN. Sports Nation was my favorite show in the world. Would I have gotten that without the help of
Right.
having some connectivity to ESPN? Probably not. Who knows? Maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Had the grades, I had the experience, but you just never know. But when it came to like getting my first job or then jobs in the industry, I probably, to my detriment, failed to take advantage of connections that I should have rested on. And I should have, like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about with that.
Mm-mm.
But for me, it was. And that's something I still have to grapple with to this day. I
I
was
do
like, I don't want
too.
help.
I struggle. I look at all the people that I know, but yet I don't want to ever ask
Yes,
anybody to introduce me to somebody else, which is crazy
I know.
because you're only as great as your network.
Yeah.
There's value in that. The other thing though I want to point out for anybody listening is that just because you got the job, you still have to do the job.
Yes.
So even though connections are great,
Right.
And people out there may feel like, oh, I feel embarrassed if I do this, but you still have to do the job.
Mhm. And
And
with this job, it's such a public job that
yes.
if you're not ready for it, and I have seen people crash and burn, and
Hmm.
it's tough. And I've seen other people who have, gotten a leg up and they've been good enough to get another leg up. And so it
Right.
works differently. Again, everyone's journey is their own. But even with that first local news job, I mean, it was the hardest job. I think it's I'm not going to say it's the hardest job because there are, jobs with life or death consequences, people and figuring out problems and solutions. But working in local TV news, I'll at least put it's not for the faint of heart. And
Right.
it takes a great deal of sacrifice. It was making very, very little money. It was working absurd hours in weird conditions like newsrooms have all sorts of personalities and politics. And, I always, even just thinking of one of the craziest days in my first job it was Valentine's Day and it fell on a weekend and I was working and there were 12 high school basketball games going. We were into like the
Oh my
tournament
God.
side of the state basketball
Right.
tournament that would lead to them all going and playing in Tacoma. And I put it upon myself that we were not going to miss a single game. And so Chris came in on his off day and he hit 2 games for me and I hit the other 10 by myself.
Oh my
I shot
God.
20 to 30 seconds of highlights at each game, come back, input all the video, you're editing the video, you're writing the scripts to the video. And I remember like sending the last video in like 3 minutes before my hit in the nightly news. I'm like, did I need 12 high school basketball games? I didn't need it. But for me, that represented like if I was going to do this job, I wanted to do it right. And I wanted
Right.
to be proud and not ever leave anything like left for interpretation. And I wanted to work my butt off. And now I look back and I'm like, you were crazy. That was the craziest thing. But those kind of lessons really did help me just like develop myself as a worker.
All right, before we get into the next topic, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about something that can really help you level up your personal brand. I've created an exclusive new book called The Visionary Personal Brand Playbook. It's perfect for those of you who have big goals but aren't exactly sure how to make your brand stand out or, for that matter, where to even start. It's packed with actionable tips that you can start using right now, today. If you're interested, head over to my website at sandy-adams.com/playbook and grab your copy. Now back to the show. You know, and I guess I think I already know the answer to this, but I think women feel like they have to work 10 times harder than a man in whatever position. What I didn't realize until a few years ago is, uh, and you talked about it just then, was that people on those local news
Mhm.
places, you have to shoot your own video, you have to edit your own video
Yeah.
and write the scripts and everything else. Like that's just like you're like an entire news thing in yourself, a news
You are
team.
a one woman band.
You
That's
are.
what they used to call it. Now they call it a multi-skilled journalist, I think, an MSJ. We also had multimedia journalist, an MMJ for a while. But really it was just you do everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
I remember being at the AAC tournament in Fort Worth like 3 years ago in Clayton. I can't think of his last
Clayton
name.
Collier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember he's like there with the video thing on his shoulder, and then he I was amazing. Like I was like I had no idea, and that you
Yeah.
guys work so hard to do that. Um,
Crazy.
in reading all of your work history, which you've had a lot of internships and jobs, very interesting. I read that you were an intern at the 2012 London Olympics.
Yes.
Okay, top 3 moments for you out of that Olympics.
I met my husband.
That's where you met him. Oh, see,
Yes.
see, I
Yes.
love it when things work out
Um,
like that.
yeah, we were both interns, and the way the NBC internship program at least worked then, and for a few years after, I'm not sure if they still do it, but they would connect with a number of universities and they would come to campus and they would interview, however many people signed up for the interviews, and then select a certain number of interns from each of those schools. And I'll share the story because I think it's a great like lesson of a story. And I thought I nailed my interview. Like I bought my first pencil skirt. I bought a little pair of like low heels. I just remember thinking like I looked the part. I'm professional. I was a freshman in college. Like they come through, I think the spring of my freshman year of college. So I'm
Right.
just a baby. But I felt really positive about it. And you spend the whole summer waiting for the results of this internship. And I remember I was actually working at my dad's office that summer, just trying to get some extra experience, using that connection,
That's right.
people coffee, doing the thing. And the email comes in from NBC and it says, we're so sorry, but you have not been selected for the NBC internship program. And I was just like, even the guttural feeling that I still get to this day, I was just crushed but it was such a good lesson. Like sometimes you think that you nail an interview
Right.
and it might not work out. And I remember I just started crying and my dad came into the office. He's like, Jess, like this is a tough position. Like I'm your dad, but I'm also, a boss here. Like go to the bathroom. I'm giving you like 20 minutes, go to the bathroom, and then you got to come back out. Like
Right.
we can talk about this at home later, but right now, like you gotta, keep this professional. So I remember doing it and I eventually, I get over it. I decide this is one of those times where I was like, I'm not doing sports. I'm leaving sports.
Right.
I hate sports. I'm going to go intern for Chelsea Handler. I wanted to work for the Chelsea Lately show and I was going to do everything in my power to do that. And I finally am like getting over it. And I go back to school for my first semester of sophomore year. And I'm sitting in a class and I get a number from like wherever they are in Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut. And I remember letting it go to voicemail. And then I just had this gut feeling and I excused myself and went to the bathroom and I checked the voicemail and it was someone from the NBC internship program. And they were like, please call us back immediately. We realized that there's been a mistake in your application.
Oh my God.
And so I called them back and it's the head of the internship program. And he's just like incredibly apologetic. He goes, we're getting our stuff situated for the internship program. And all of a sudden I realized I did your interview personally. I wanted you on my team. I recognized that you weren't in the materials of people to send out to. I apologize. This is our mistake, but you actually were selected to be an intern. Are you able to commit to this? Have you found another internship? I'm like, Chelsea Handler, don't need you anymore. I'm going to the Olympics. And one of my best friends at USC had been selected. So that had been a tough thing too. Like one of my best friends had gotten, I'm trying to support her in that. And she was in that class that I was going back to. And I just remember telling her and we were so amped. But it's like the working world is weird. Like you might get a no. It could be a no that was supposed to be a yes. It could be a yes that was supposed to be a no. You're going to be okay no matter what. You're going to figure it out. You're going to adapt. But that's the story of how I end up in London for the Olympics. And if I hadn't been there, like I would not be married to my husband right now. And that was just the coolest thing in the world. I got to see the men's basketball team and LeBron. And so it's been fun to watch the Olympics this time around with LeBron and KD back at it. Got to go to swimming, which was very much
I love the swimming and the diving.
yes. I just being in the atmosphere of the pool was a place that everybody wanted to go. So that felt really cool. And then one of my jobs, I just did very random jobs for the whole summer. And I was always volunteering. I was like, do you need anything?
Right.
Do it because I want to be able to get out and meet as many people as possible and experience as much as possible. And I got to drive Al Michaels in a golf cart. And he asked me where I went to school. And I said USC. And he started singing the USC fight song. And so we started doing the like fight on for
Oh
USC
my God.
golf cart. And I just always, so often they're like, never meet your heroes. And I've certainly had my share of never meet your heroes because they'll disappoint you. But in meeting him, like, he was just the kindest, warmest soul that you could have asked for in that moment.
That is so cool. Can I ask really quickly how you actually met Chris, your
Yes,
husband?
sure. We were both interns and originally we stayed in two different locations throughout the internship program. And I was getting ready to go out with some girlfriends and they were like, oh, we were in the first crop. Like the interns came in waves. And so we were like week 0 of the internship program. So there were very few people there to start. And they're like, we met this guy. Do you mind if he comes with us? I'm like, sure, the more the merrier. And Chris actually, he loves to tell this story. It was in his house. But I was on my phone in the lobby of this hotel, and I guess he was introduced to me, and I didn't hear because I was distracted on my phone. And he said, it's really rude to be on your phone when you first meet someone. And I like snapped and I said, it's really weird to be the P word when you first meet somebody. And that was the beginning of our love story.
Okay. I think that's because I've asked a lot of guests on here. Like I love to hear how they met their husbands or wives. That's probably the funniest one. But it really is like, because I've seen, oh my God, y'all's videos, like especially when you've got like him in the background, they're so funny.
Yeah.
So that pretty much that's awesome. And you wouldn't be here with me now if I would not know you if you
I
guys.
know. It's so weird. It's one of those things because I get lost in the sauce sometimes of decisions you make that lead you
Yes.
here. And even if I had somehow still ended up in Memphis, because he came with me to Memphis from our jobs in the Tri-Cities, Washington. Like
Oh,
I
I
get
didn't.
at
Yeah.
Local 24 because it was always hard. Sports jobs were harder. He was just news, not just news.
Right.
News. I want to diminish the news. But there were more news jobs, especially for men. They're
Sure.
always looking
Yes.
for a dude.
Yes.
And so less sports jobs. So we always kind of situated it as I would set the pace of where we were going. And so I
Mhm.
get the job at Local 24 in Memphis. He comes with me without a job. Luckily, he got a job almost instantly at WMC Action News 5. But if I had been in Memphis without him, I don't know if I would still be in Memphis because I think a
Yeah.
part of my Memphis journey that has allowed me to fall in love with Memphis and to truly feel that Memphis is my home is that I had a partner to do it with me.
Yeah.
Like the loneliness of this industry can be just like paralyzing for people
Mhm.
because you move someplace where you don't know anybody, and then you're not getting out in the community and you're not meeting people and you're not going to museums and games and the theater or restaurants or anything. And so the fact that I had a partner from the beginning who wanted to go out and explore and like take in everything that Memphis had to offer was so helpful for me, being like, oh, I like that. I never expected to live
Yeah.
in this place, but I really like this place.
It's true because I mean, I can go and do stuff by myself all the time, but it's not as fun. You can't experience things as much when it's just yourself. And one of the things, Houston is so much different than Memphis, but that was one of my issues with Houston was that one, nobody I knew liked sports, but two, you know, I didn't have like, I mean, even though I had a partner at the time, even when that ended, I didn't really have anybody to go and do stuff with. And you just you feel very lonely.
Isolating.
Yes, it
And
really is.
holidays, like working in the news, you can't leave for
Right.
holidays. So you're, stuck wherever you're working that day. And
Hmm.
it can be that can be one of the toughest things about that industry is, especially when you move somewhere and you work with some people who are from the place that
Right.
you're currently living, because they just can't conceptualize what it's like to say, hey, you're not going to see your family for every year, almost the entire year. You're certainly not
Right.
going to be there for holidays. You're not going to be there for birthdays. You're not going to be there if you're a weekend sports anchor. Like you're working all the weekends, so you
Right.
can't take a weekend trip. So it's one more hurdle that's really difficult to overcome. But having Chris here and
Hmm.
alongside with me, and also him being in the industry too, like
Sure.
we
Sure.
got it. There was never a question. If someone had to miss something, we never guilted the other person because we
Right.
completely understood this is just the reality.
And he obviously loves sports as well. And so, you've got that same love of something that kind of bonds you together too. We've talked about you developing your voice and you talked about how that was really good for you when you first started out in the television studio. So what would be your recommendation to young women out there that are interested in broadcast journalism or sports media or whatever? How can they start developing their voice?
You have to focus on it, and you have to be like unabashedly obsessed with you and what you are in the industry. Like that, you don't want to be a copycat because everybody is vying for these jobs, and the
Right.
only unique thing that you bring to the table. There are a ton of people who love sports. There are a ton of people who are good on camera. There are a ton of people who can weave a great story, people who can do highlights, people who can report, people who can do stats, whatever it may be. The only difference is you and your personality and how you specifically want to talk about sports. And I see this, and it's strange because I am someone who I'm a people pleaser by fault. My therapist and I work on it constantly.
Really?
Oh my God, yes. Horribly. Horribly. So, which in this industry is not bad, because no part of you is bad. You're just
Right.
trying to figure out all the parts of you. But like, you cannot make everybody happy in this
No.
industry. There will be people who will hate you, not for any fault of your own, other than existing and being, and especially being a woman in this space. It's like,
Yes.
you're a woman and you talk about sports. Somebody out there, before they even know the first syllable of your name, hates everything that you're about.
Mhm.
So for me, having to learn, I can only make myself happy. I can only trust in like my close circle. If they think I'm doing a good job, then I'm probably doing a good job. And I can't listen to some of that
No.
outside
No.
noise. And that's my biggest thing, especially for young women. It's like, you cannot get anchored down by the bad. Allow the good to lift you up. But I know from a
Right.
personal experience, or a personal standpoint, when you're hearing a hodgepodge of, not even like when you're hearing 98% good things from people who are consuming your content, but you hear 2% bad, for whatever reason, you are so focused on the 2%
Sure
bad.
you are.
And
Yes.
so it's almost more helpful to just kind of like ice it all, accept it, allow it to like float in your peripherals, but just know how you feel, and find people you trust who are able to say, hey, you're really good at this, but you could get better here.
Right.
And constructive criticism, especially early in your career, is so valuable because you want to get better. You have to get better. But a part of getting better is also just doing the reps and figuring out,
Mm-hmm.
this is how I sound. This is what I'm most comfortable sounding like, or what I'm most comfortable talking about, and then going from there. So it's not really a perfect science, unfortunately, because you just have to do it. It's truly one of those jobs you just have to do.
It is. It really is. Somebody asked me, like, how are you so comfortable on video? And I said, well, you should have seen the first video I ever did. Like, I didn't even blink.
Oh, I still talk fast. So apologies to
No,
all
no, no. And
listeners
I
out
sometimes
there.
I think I talk too slow. But yeah, the first time I did it, but also I taught virtually for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I got, to me now, I can laugh at myself. And if I mess up, I don't care. Just
Yes.
move on.
That's such a
Um,
freeing thing. Like, it really, once you can get to that, and I've always had like a good sense of humor about myself, but I've just allowed dumb criticism to seep in. I remember one time, I wear hoop earrings all the time, and
mhm.
I was trying to get an agent um at one point in my career. And this agent responded back and she was like, never wear hoop earrings again. It makes someone think you're that kind of a girl. I was like, what the hell? Like, why would you think that to me? Or women, like older women would always write in. You'd get creepy dudes writing to you on local news, but you would get older women writing just some of the meanest stuff that things you never thought about yourself, your makeup color choice, your clothing color choice. One time a woman wrote and told me that her son asked if women could be douchebags after
Uh,
watching me on a sportscast once. And I, like, what inclines you? That was an email. That wasn't even finding me on social. Like, what inclined you to find my email address?
and
And
who has the time to do that?
care.
I have a friend in London. She actually runs this history nonprofit for Asian women. And she made a post this morning because she's got women that are sending her messages telling her that she's too old to wear some of the things she wears and that she needs to change her makeup. And she's like, why?
My
Like why? My big thing that I've heard over the years is, somebody will say, oh, you like sports, prove it.
oh God.
Prove you like sports.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like, I don't even understand that. Like,
I promise, spend 20 minutes with me and you'll wish that I liked
yeah.
sports less. You'll wish that I wanted to talk about anything else.
Okay, so let's talk about the media landscape because it's really changed since, although you do make me feel really old because
No,
you had a phone in high school.
it was the beginning. It was the beginning.
I didn't have a computer. Like the computers weren't even around. Word Perfect was when I was in college. Word Perfect was starting to come out. I really aged myself. But
No,
anyway,
it's okay. I remember our first was like we had Encarta, which was the
I don't even know what that.
encyclopedia on the computer. I just remember it was like the first time you could do research on your computer before you really had the internet. You would have these discs that were
Oh, that's
encyclopedias called Encarta, and I was obsessed with them when I was a kid.
okay. So the media landscape has really changed, and with the shift to almost all digital, like really, except for the TV people. How do you navigate that transition in your job now?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Even when the opportunity arose with the Memphis Grizzlies, I was kind of at this crossroads of my career, and COVID came
Yes.
whooping through, which created a reality for me. You know, I got taken off of sports because there were no sports, so
Right.
understandably so. But I'm in my local TV job, and I'm taken off sports and told, all right, you're doing a morning news show and kind of like a daily COVID show. And it took me back to, all these conversations we've had, even just today, about I didn't want to do news. I wanted to do sports. And there was
Right.
something, you know, that was a boundary that I put up fairly early. I was never going to take a hybrid job between sports and news. I was never going to take a news job to try to get to a sports job because I saw so many people in the industry do that and then end up in news forever. And yet here I ended up working a news job by necessity, and the timing of it was what it was. But ultimately getting, this opportunity with the Grizzlies and seeing the forward thinking of creating this digital space and creating media within a team, because I think we're seeing more and more teams,
Mhm.
not just in the NBA, but in sports in general, trying to put together more in-house content. And we do it in such a creative and complex way in truly having at this point 6 to 8 hours of live content coming out of the Grand City Media studios every day. At the time, it was just the Chris Vernon show, and they were trying to add a morning show. And they came to me and asking if I was interested in being a part of that. And it just sounded, in an industry where so much was getting taken away,
Mhm.
here was an organization that was adding. And
Right.
that was so like promising to, I was like, oh my God, it's like the great frontier. Like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Uh, and now seeing how the podcast, I mean, every podcast, not every podcast, but so many have the video component of it. And I think that really kind of came through post 2020 when we got more accustomed to doing things on Zoom. Even if
Yes.
you're in a studio, you can do a video podcast anywhere. You get a microphone, you get a
Mhm.
laptop, and you're good to go. And also the fun thing for me about now, God, it's been like 5 years in this role, but I can have opinions, and I can actually talk about sports in a way that you would talk about sports with your husband or friends at a
Right.
bar or family. Whereas with the local news side of the sports space, like I had 3 minutes max at the
Yeah.
end of a newscast. And so you're just trying to get the greatest hits, and maybe it's highlights, and maybe every once in a while you get to tell a really cool or emotional or meaningful story. And there's great value in that. But now every single day, I can spend a half hour
Yes.
telling one story. And to have that kind of openness, I think people craved just casual conversation
Mhm.
where it sounds like the people you're talking to, as opposed to, hi, I'm Jessica Benson, and this is the nightly sportscast.
Right.
This whole like voice thing and the projection of it. So it excites me. And even seeing how people who might not consume the show in its entirety in all hour and a half to 2 hour glory, it's the clips of it, and people who will say, oh, I saw your Instagram reel, or I saw your
Right.
TikTok, or I saw your YouTube short. And so just the different levels of which people can engage with content now, it just far exceeds where like the medium of television
Right.
is. I think TV, maybe I'm old now. I think TV will always exist, and there will always be importance, and live sports plays a huge part in my perceived importance of
Right.
television. Um, but just like all of the ancillary content, there's just so many different ways you can go with it. Why limit yourself to how we've always done it?
Well, and the thing that I love is that anybody can do it. If I have a friend of mine that I've worked with, and he always wanted to like do some type of sports related job. And I said, you have a Facebook page. Go do a weekly Facebook Live. Talk about your sports. There's just so much out there. And when I did my first podcast, because this is not my first show, when I did my first one, I literally on a Friday night was like, I'm going to start a podcast.
Podcast.
And thanks to COVID, though, I started recording on Zoom. I was doing them in person. And
Okay.
then when COVID hit, I was like, well, I don't have anything to do. Everybody has time now. And then I could get guests from all over the country
Yeah.
and overseas. And it just became, then I'm like, I'm never going to do it in person again.
Right. It opens up the world, really.
It does. It opens up the world, and it's so much easier. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to set up anything. It's so much easier to do.
And it just feels like you said, anyone, if they put their mind to it, can
Anyone.
do it. And that's my biggest thing that I find myself telling young people, asking, like, how do I do what you do someday? And I go, you
Do
have
it.
you
Do
have
it.
the opportunity to do something that I never did, because
Right.
we were so obsessed with everything we put out on the internet needed to be
Right.
perfect. Like, God forbid, if you had a picture with a red Solo cup, you were never going to get hired in this world. But now those boundaries, and like, don't go crazy. Don't be putting stupid stuff. Like, you
I
will
know.
still have to stand, and don't say stupid stuff.
Right.
You have the potential to start growing that audience now. And like, if you're, in college and you start a sports show about the school that you're at and the sports that interest you there, that audience could stick with you forever. And it
Mm-hmm.
creates this baseline where you're not starting from scratch. And then from a getting rep standpoint, you're getting better every time you put a show
Yes.
together. Like, you don't have to wait until somebody, and I hope someday somebody gives what the metaphorical person that I'm talking about in this situation a job, but you don't have to wait until you're collecting a paycheck to
Right.
start doing it. By no means do I say work for free. This is not a matter of working for
Right.
free. This is just a matter of doing something for you that advances your portfolio and your online persona in a way that I couldn't have imagined like a
Right.
decade ago, that that's where we'd be.
I mean, people can get experience. They can create their own experience by just creating content and putting it out there. It's just the opportunities are just crazy now. Um, we've talked about sports is really a male dominated industry. What's been your experience as a woman in sports media?
I swim in a pool of testosterone. That sounded horrible. I'm surrounded by men most of the time in my life, and it's been a curious case study, because I will think that we're getting more women, and then we'll have less women. And in my
Yeah.
time in Memphis specifically, like, there have been periods of time where women have worked in the sports space, and there are so many women on social media, and I always want to give them credit, who
Right.
are adding their voices to the sports conversation. But in terms of like being in a press conference room with either the local TV stations and the paper and the radio, the number of women is very small. Like, I remember when I first started in Memphis, Carrie Anderson, who used to work at Channel 5,
Hmm.
she was in her last like 2 weeks at Channel 5 when I started. So I had her as an ally, and then she became a friend, but she wasn't in the industry anymore. Sharon Brown, who covers the Grizzlies, she would be at games, and I'd see her sometimes. And sometimes she'd be the only woman I would see for
Right.
months. And then we had, a variety of women who came through at local TV stations at any given time. But it's it's been fewer than I would
Yeah.
like. It's lonely. Like, I would love for there to be just an insane amount of women working in the sports space in Memphis, because when you're all able to work together, it makes it so much more fun.
Hmm.
And there's
Yes.
this like camaraderie, this natural camaraderie, just by being women in the industry, surviving the industry as women together. And I hope that if we're catching up 5 years from now, it will have stuck, because I think that's my biggest takeaway, is it's been sprinkled, but it hasn't stuck.
Okay.
Like, there
Yeah.
are still, I feel so fortunate to have a daily sports talk show in Memphis. But I don't think there has been one woman with a daily sports talk show on local radio,
No.
ever. And
No. There,
crazy.
there
I don't think
hasn't.
there's ever been at least in my time, there hasn't been a female sports director who is the Monday through Friday sports anchor at a local TV station.
Yeah.
And it's 2024. Um, so that part can be a little disheartening, but that's why at this point in my career, it is so important to me. And if there's any young woman out there listening, like, please send me a message, because I want to create a little army that all comes to this
Yes.
eventually and not takes over. We're not into taking over, but just appropriately fills our space
Well,
within the industry.
and you know what I love is that you're doing this show, and hopefully all these young girls, they, we talk about, we want to give children a chance to see themselves in these jobs. And so you are giving young girls a chance to see that that is possible, that that is an option for them, that, here you are every day doing this, and just keep at it. Like, seriously. And I would love to help you build that army, because I absolutely want to hear, I want to hear and see more women in sports, and the coverage of women in
And a
sports.
variety of jobs. And yes, like,
Yes.
the time is now for talking. I mean, I've always felt a responsibility to talk more about women's sports that my male counterparts will never think of. It
Right.
will never cross their mind of, hey, I need to be talking about the WNBA today, because if I'm not going to do it, who is?
Right.
And in reality, if they talked about it too, like, we would all be a step further in the continuing case of reminding people that the WNBA is really cool. And Caitlin Clark is awesome. But
Right.
there's a great league, and it's full of games that you can watch any given night if you want, especially this time of year. But I appreciate what you said about, having a job now and being able to see someone like me in the job that I carry, because that is something that I lacked. And I think it prevented me from fully ever seeing this as a dream job. And it goes back to those conversations in journalism school of, well, if you want to work in sports, you have to be a sideline reporter, and that's not serious journalism. And having that kind of thing embedded early on, even though I look back at, women that I looked up to, in Robin Roberts in particular, and she goes from the sports space into the morning show and Good Morning America, and just being such a warm television presence in general. But I'd see Linda Cohen on Sports Center growing up, but she was the only one. I was like, well, if there's only one, why should I try for this? There's no room for more. To now having people like I think Elle Duncan is one of the coolest people in the industry right now. And talk about someone who knows her voice and uses who she is exactly, shows up as herself every given day and can
Right.
inspire more people. Like, if I had had an Elle Duncan, maybe I would have had a different perception of what I could do. But anyway, I ended up in this space in general. And I hope that people, or women in particular, can now envision themselves. If you want to be a sideline reporter, that's awesome.
Right.
I think sideline reporters are so underrated in the sports broadcasting space, and they do so much work that never gets any credit
Well,
whatsoever. Also,
sure.
be prepared for these, small hits within a game. And if you want to do that, all power to you, because I couldn't do it, because it stresses me out. Anytime I'm a sideline reporter, I get like the worst nerves of my career. But if you want to do something else, there are other jobs other than
Right.
just that one, which makes for a happier, fuller situation for all.
Okay. So throughout your career, what have been some of the sacrifices that you've had to put up with, or give up? What have been some of the things that you've had to give up?
I miss my parents
Yeah.
a lot. My parents are both older. They're in their 70s, and having to be so far away from them is so hard.
Now,
My mom,
where did they live? Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside Denver, Colorado,
Oh, I
and
didn't know
my dad
that.
is now in Denver,
Okay.
and my mom is in Seattle. So also having divorced parents makes it tricky, because
Yes.
you have to, and my husband is of divorced parents. His father unfortunately passed, but he has his mom still in San Francisco, and my mom in Seattle, and my dad in
Wow.
Denver. And so we're really spaced out. And so when you're trying to find the time, and we don't have the holidays, because even though we're out of local news, the Grizzlies do play games around. They played the day before Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas this year. They played the day before Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving this year. So it's just a good example that you kind of become landlocked.
Right.
there's no nonstop flight from Memphis to Seattle, which is really
Mhm.
tough. There is one to Denver, which is great, and sometimes I'll try to fly to Denver and then Denver to Seattle. But I think that the family component of it is definitely the hardest. And a lot of my friends who populated into New York or California or Chicago and having multiple, my friends from college, I've made great friends in Memphis, which has made it feel like less of a sacrifice,
Sure.
especially more recent years as I've gotten deeper in those friendships. But like my friends who were just going out for dinner on a Friday night, and I haven't seen that friend in 2 years.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of stuff that the older you get, the more you recognize like the career part is awesome. And I live my dream every single day. But the family and friends part is just as, if not
Yeah.
more important. And I'm so grateful to have a supportive partner who makes that so much easier on any given day. But that'll always do it. I think I worked my first 7 Christmases coming out of
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
That's hard.
My mom was a nurse in my junior high and high school years, and she had to work either Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day. So it didn't get those options. I want to talk just a quick. You and your husband Chris. Do you guys still dog sit?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
That okay. So the funniest videos you make, like you make great content, okay? But tell like I had asked you that one time. I was like, you're dog sitting too. So talk a little bit about why you got into dog sitting.
Oh, so we got into dog sitting because we work in local news, and this is my plea for local news stations to please pay your employees and to continue rising in wages because you're giving up a lot of your life for very little
Right.
payout at this point, and it doesn't appear to be getting better. But we were so sick of making no money. We were so sick of feeling so strapped, and then we got engaged, and I guess we started watching the dogs before we got engaged, but it was forward thinking of we're gonna have a wedding to pay for someday. We have no savings. We're
Right.
barely skating by with just our 2 salaries. So let's try to see if we can make some extra money. And it was so odd because don't get me wrong, I love dogs. I had a dog growing up.
Right.
I would never have considered myself like an animal. You know some people who are just animal people. Like
Yes.
they
Yes.
gravitate. That was not me. That was I appreciate animals, but it's not like I was, you know, spending the majority of my life with animals in any given way. Chris loves dogs. You see a dog on the street, if you are walking your dog and my husband is walking by you, I am so sorry. He is going to stop and pet your dog. I have tried to set boundaries for him, but and so we started it on this app called Rover,
Hmm.
which is like the Uber for dog sitting, is how I always call it. And one dog led to another. And we have now been dog sitting for 4 years. We have watched over 100 animals in that time period. We have periods where we barely live in our home.
Right.
We prefer to house sit because the dog is always more comfortable in
Sure.
somebody else's house.
Yeah.
And it's become this great supplementary income for us where even as we have grown in our careers and might not need it, we're so
Hmm.
used to it, and we love to travel, and we love to travel big. And so now, as we don't have children still, we treat our dog funds as our travel funds, and it has allowed us to continue to go on some pretty cool trips. So we do dog sit. If you have dogs to be sat, please reach out. But we have a very busy calendar. We have great repeat clients, or regular clients, I should say, where those dogs are like our dogs and we treat them as such. We
Right.
just don't own them, but they are such an important part of our family. It's become a very sweet thing.
I dog sit for a couple of my friends so that they can go out of town, and the same thing. And they have big dogs, and I've had big dogs, so I'm used to that. But yeah, every time I do that, I think about you. Although my dog sitting is not as fun as yours appears on social media. Um, the
We do
the
have good dogs.
you do, and just the funny, like the one time you got locked out of the bedroom.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That was
Like
crazy.
all your stuff was in the bedroom and you got locked out of the bedroom. I'm like, who does that?
Yes, the doors were kind of glitchy, and next thing we knew, the door locked itself. There was no outside key. the person was not responding. Like he was out of the country, I think, and like a time difference. So we didn't know if
Right.
there was a spare key anywhere in the house. Our wallets were in there and we couldn't go and get food. I remember because we had no money. And finally we found like a wire hanger and Chris like jerry rigged the door open. And I will never forget the pride of that man when he got that door. We had so many. I mean, one of our favorites is we had this like giant mastiff, which is just a massive dog.
Mhm.
And this was like right before COVID. And or not before, like right at the beginning. And I had one
Right.
of my last public appearances that would be, I was talking to a class at the University of Memphis, and I'm supposed to go talk there about my big, important sports journalism job because I'm a very serious person. And we're dog sitting to make extra money because we don't make any. And this mastiff comes into our apartment at the time, and within the span of 5 minutes, pooped 3 times.
Oh.
Just like horrifying levels of that. And we're like on the ground trying to clean this up. And I'm like, I have to go to the University of Memphis. Like, I've got to get to this class. And I had to leave it with Chris. But it teaches you someday I really want to write a book. That is one of my like big goals in life is to be a novelist. So I'm gonna move to the Irish countryside and be a novelist. But I always think one of the good books would be about being a dog sitter and
Yes.
just the humbling of cleaning up other people's dogs. Because it's one thing to clean up after your own dog, but to make the active decision to clean up after somebody else's job or dog, it reminds
Yes.
you that we are all just trying to
Just
meddle
trying to
through the ish
That's
together.
right. That's right. Just trying to. Um, the other thing is you guys have an Instagram account called Date Night in Memphis.
Yes, I try to make it a thing. I keep trying. We eat out. We love food. We love going to restaurants. We love supporting restaurants in the city. We
Right.
are downtowners through and through. I love downtown Memphis. I will support downtown Memphis until the trolley wheels fall off, which get the trolley back. We can make that happen too. But so we're always trying on our weekends to go to
Right.
either our favorite restaurants or new restaurants. So I was like, let's make an Instagram page and put
I
our
gotta tell you, you've made me like want to go to some of the places because you do such a good job. Like it looks really good.
oh, thank you. Mission accomplished.
Yes.
I have so
Yes.
many pictures in my phone that I just have never posted. So after we get off, I'm going to post a restaurant.
Yes, do that. Do that. Okay, so let's talk really quickly. I'm going to wrap this up. Like the future of women in sports, and I think we've kind of already discussed that pretty much. But, where do you want to see, like in the next couple of years, where would you like to see women in sports go? Like, or even if it's just Memphis or just across the country.
I would just love for it to become not where it doesn't feel like a gimmick for
Mm.
one woman to work in a department. Like
Right.
I think the more and the women don't have to outnumber the men. I'm not trying to be unrealistic
Right.
in this future dream of mine. But where one isn't enough. Because right now one feels like the bare minimum.
Right.
And once you get one, I think a lot of people say, well, we have one, so
Yes.
we don't need to add
Yes.
any more. And so when the conversation away from the tokenism of women in sports shifts into how do we how do we use women to enhance our departments? Because that's what's happening. Like your department
Right.
is enhancing. It's different perspective, it's different voices, it's allowing for
Yes.
different audience members to connect with someone who maybe they were intimidated by sports coverage, but because it's a woman and they're a woman, they're enjoy it in a different way than they ever
Hmm.
thought that they could enjoy sports. So just moving away from like, oh, we're just lucky to be here. Like we're doing a
Yeah.
good job because we're one. And so having many, I think that would be the greatest part. And just continuing to see those roles challenged too. More and more women are getting into the play-by-play space, which is great.
Right.
Analyst chairs, which is awesome. Hosts, panelists,
Hmm.
social media influencers, whatever it could be. And having more and more women have the opportunity to work there is great. And I think we will see that because I think there have been such an inspirational number of women recently who have, built on what the women of the past laid the
Right.
groundwork for. And now you have someone, I mean, like Mina Kimes is one of the coolest sports people. She's not one of the coolest women in sports. She's just one of the coolest
Right.
sports analysts, talkers, discussers in the game. And so the more Mina Kimes we have of the world, the better off that will be, where it's just like, oh, I really love hearing her opinion, not because I'm shocked that a woman can have an opinion or have this take on
Right.
sports, but simply because she has it.
And I love the fact that, we women do have a specific voice to say. They have a specific insight on things. And, the more people that you put out there, the more these young girls have a chance to see what is possible. I've been vocal the past several months about the lack of women in sports, especially in Memphis. And I get tired of hearing, well, we we don't have that many viewers. And I'm like, but if you put the content out,
Yeah.
you might bring the viewers. Or if you focused on, hey, go get some uh, people that want to buy ads that are from women-owned companies. And granted, I don't work in that space, so I can't, I'm just out there, giving them an argument. But I don't like to hear, well, we'll build it when they come. I want to hear, let's build it, then they'll come,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, and it's just, everybody like rolls their eyes at me and stuff. But let's talk about really quick, wrapping up. I want to talk about NBA season starts in October. Ja Morant will be back, hopefully fully at 110%. What do we have to look forward to? Like, what are you looking forward to other than the guys being back on the court?
I'm genuinely really hot on this team for this year. And it's such a thing to say because I work for the Grizzlies and I work
Right.
for media, and it benefits me if this team is good. I'll
Sure,
put it.
sure, sure
Not
it
only have
does.
I grown to become a fan of this team and care about this team, my day-to-day is much more fun when the Grizzlies are winning and are
Right.
legitimate competitors. But I do believe from a sports intuition standpoint and just a sports knowledge standpoint, what we know is that when Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. are all on the basketball court together, this team is really, really good. And now they have also added in the likes of a Zach Edey, taken with the rookie pick,
Right.
what he can be. And sure, you never know what a rookie can turn into until you see him on the court. But we've seen the vision of Ja operating with a big man, whether it be Steven Adams or Jonas
Right.
Valanciunas, and Ja Morant operating in space is a wonderful thing, not just for the Grizzlies, but for basketball, because you get amazing highlights and you get kids who just want to watch Ja Morant highlights all the time because of what he can do. You also just have, to think about Marcus Smart, another former defensive player of the year. Last season was such an overall disappointment that I don't think we have yet to understand
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what he can be. But because of the lumps that were taken last year, we also got the vision on Vince Williams and the vision on Gigi Jackson. And so I just think this is truly a stacked roster. Find me another roster that has the legitimate, not the promise of depth. And I
Right.
that's a little bit unfair to say because it is factoring on the promise of depth when it comes to Zach Edey and the role that he can play in the front court. But there is legitimate depth to be had there. And the West is, evergreen. It's always going to be a tough conference, but there is no reason why the Grizzlies can't truly compete for a spot in the Western Conference Finals this year.
Okay. So again, let's talk about, where can everybody find your show?
The Jessica Benson Show with CJ Hurt, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on Grind City Media, live on YouTube on the Grind City Media YouTube page. There's also the Grind City Media and the Memphis Grizzlies app if you prefer to go about it that way. If you like audio, you can just listen to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you don't have to watch it live on YouTube at 8. It is there all day for you to engage with. And then you can follow Grind City Media on Instagram and TikTok, and you can watch the short clips from the show too. So you can find it all there.
Okay. And where can everybody find you on social media?
I am at Jess Benson TV on Instagram and on Twitter, and I think on Facebook. And then on TikTok, I'm JB Jams.
I don't think I'm following you on TikTok, so I'm going to go
Oh, we
follow
gotta
you
get
on TikTok.
on TikTok.
And I'll put all the links to everything in the show notes. So anyway, Jessica, thank you
This
so
was so
much
fun.
for
Thank you.
doing this.
You're amazing. I can learn interview skills from you. This was great.
Oh my God. I feel honored. Okay. Thank you so much. So thank you all for listening, especially if you've made it all the way to this part of the show. I appreciate all your support. Another reminder to subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. My mantra is like, share, and review. Follow us on social media at 5THQRT Podcast. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week. You can now send us a text message directly from your favorite audio platform. Yes. So whether you've got a question, want to give us feedback, or just want to share your thoughts on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Look in the show notes at the very start and you will see the phrase, send us a text. Click that link, send us your message, and that's it. We can't wait to read them.